Pentico at the Rental Housing Association, and Molly Kirkland, our Director of Public Affairs. Today's January 13th, 2021. Happy New Year, everyone. We just wanted to take this time to do a quick update on things legislatively and how things are going with COVID and all the policies, how that's changed now that the Georgia elections have been decided. The federal seats have been secured, the state seats have been identified, the county and city jurisdictions have all been solidified. So just a quick update and tell you where things stand and what we're looking forward to this year. Molly?
All right, thank you. Well, I'll start on the federal level, which we won't delve in too much other to say than we will know in the near future kind of how things will shake out and hear from NAA on the policy measures coming forward. But we do know that a large federal relief package was signed, and the good news is that there was $25 billion in there for direct rental assistance, and that will be going to states and to jurisdictions with populations over 200,000. So our association has already reached out to the County of San Diego, County of Riverside, City of Chula Vista, City of San Diego to urge them to move quickly. There was actually a deadline yesterday with the Treasury to accept the award, as they call it, and that will be a large chunk of funding that tenants themselves can apply for rental assistance going forward several months and for some past due rent. And the program allows to help up to folks with incomes up to 80% AMI, and also it allows for property owners and managers to apply for on behalf of a tenant in some cases. So we just have to work with different jurisdictions to kind of craft that part of the policy and how a property owner or manager can go about applying on behalf of their resident. So more to come on that front, but we are looking forward to having some actual financial assistance in place versus the limited funding we've seen in the last few months.
I'll just say, Molly, that I was on the NAA Board of Directors meeting this morning, and they did a minor update on the legislative issues. And I know with the legislature at the federal level, the way things laid out, that they think that there's going to be more chance to negotiate on items, particularly on Section 8, and trying to make Section 8 more landlord friendly. We've always supported the program, though many of our members are actively involved in it, but they've all know that it's a struggle to make it actually work. We do fairly well in San Diego. We've got great working relationships with our housing authorities and commissions and such, but in most parts of the country, it doesn't work quite as easily. So I know that promising, there's hopefulness on the Section 8 side, so we'll keep our fingers crossed there and watch for more.
And that's a great point, Alan. There's always improvement that can be made for those programs and to make them more user friendly. One thing I think that we've seen and heard from some property owners in last few months with regards to Section 8 is it's actually been very helpful. That's a guaranteed check from government, and during a time when many people can't pay rent, folks who have participate in Section 8 or have project-based Section 8 have found themselves in a better position as a result of partnering with that program. So we're hoping going forward that, like I said, we can make it more user-friendly, easier to navigate, and always the biggest thing is to make sure that there are more vouchers available and more funding, especially in high-cost areas like California.
Excellent.
We'll jump to the state, and that's where probably the bulk of things are going on. As you know, we have AB 3088, which has a very long title, but basically it shakes out to be the COVID eviction protection bill that passed and was effective September 1 of last year. I think most people have been operating under that for a few months now and are used to it. It's set to expire at the end of this month. And the day that the legislature went and got sworn in, there were two bills introduced immediately to extend that. One bill on the Assembly side, AB 15, is from Assemblymember Chu, who you may recognize was not only the author of AB 3088, but also the author of AB 1482, our landmark rent cap and just cause legislation that impacts all properties statewide. He has introduced a bill to extend AB 3088 through the end of 2021. At the same time, it proposes a litany of other things. It's not just an extension of the existing legislation. It creates stiffer penalties. It takes away your ability to have late fees, a few other things. So we have a little bit of heartburn over that. We think the biggest thing, it just goes way too far out, potentially longer than hopefully the pandemic is in place. So we are opposing that bill, and we are supporting the bill from the Senate side. It's called SB3. It's a more practical approach. It seeks to extend the legislation through the end of March. And the thought process there is, let's do a simple extension of what's already in place, what property owners and managers are used to, what residents are used to, moreover, what the courts and judges are used to. You know, they've got the process down now, all the forms created. And that gives the legislature time to work on something more long-term, including financial assistance. We have, as a stakeholder, you know, representing owners and managers, we have a lot of concerns with AB 3088. Now that it's been in place for several months, I think we see some of the issues in that particular legislation. For instance, you know, residents only have to return a declaration of hardship and no documentation to prove that they are actually financially impacted. So, you know, as is the case with any legislation, we want to make sure we curtail abuse and make sure that the folks who actually need the assistance and the protections are getting it. So we'll be continuing on that path. We're hopeful that we can get that done before January 31st. So we have a statewide solution in place, because as you remember from back in March and April, we had every jurisdiction around San Diego County and Riverside creating their own ordinances, which created this big patchwork. And you might remember our spreadsheet trying to navigate all that. So we want to avoid that. And we understand that there's some jurisdictions that don't have, you know, local moratorium in place. And this, you know, letting AB 3088 expire may sound like a smarter move, but I guarantee you, and all signs point to this, that something will be passed at the state level in some regard. So if you're not covered now, and if you're not covered at some point under a local ordinance, you will be again under a state law. So to borrow from Alan, we want to be at the table and not on the menu.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's smart to take it quarter by quarter, or 3 to 4 months bites at a time, if you will, because we need to focus on something a little longer than month to month for sure. But we don't want to go out so long that we're forgetting to start focusing on what happens on the way out of this pandemic. And that has to be looked at and has to be taken into consideration now. These things don't move quickly, as we know. So I think that, you know, pushing for the at least quarterly, if not 4 months at a time, is a smart thing to do. Yeah. Yeah,
and to remember, AB 3088 does allow or does require that residents pay a certain portion of rent, and local moratoria that's never been included in any ordinance that we've seen. And already we are hearing that the mayor in the city of San Diego, the new mayor, Todd Gloria, would like to pursue a local eviction moratorium. It would look a lot like the one we saw last year from the city, but probably be pushed out further, have stiffer penalties, and who knows what the repayment period would look like. But I think they would like to pursue that being consumer debt, similar to AB 3088, which creates a whole nother host of issues.
Yeah, you know, we had that meeting with the mayor's office the other day, and you know, I just go back to the comment that it's a burden for a tenant to send a piece of paper saying they're impacted by COVID. You know, landlords don't have, or property owners, I should say, don't have that opportunity to send a COVID form into the property tax collector saying, hey, I've been impacted by COVID, or to their mortgage company, or to any of their suppliers and vendors. So I'm mixed on. I don't think that that's much of a burden for them to overtake, and they have that ability to do that. And that's all we're looking for, is that line of communication. And then yes, like you said, there are some other things of concern. I mean, in a lot of ways, these policies, by moving these the rent collections to small claims courts, you know, we're now having to become debt collectors.
Yeah, and that comes, you know, besides you're going to be chasing money, and it's hard to get, especially if somebody moves out of state, as I understand. But there's a whole host of regulatory issues that come with that. I think both at the state and federal level. I mean, a litany of new laws that, you know, property owners and managers would have to learn and be subject to. And I think that's already going to be the case somewhat with AB 3088. But the whole reason that we want an opportunity to work on legislation that's longer term and have a say is so we can look for potential exemptions or things like that. So again, supporting that kind of short-term, quick extension so we can work on something and really kind of make our voice heard, because property owners, and we hear this all the time and we tell this to elected officials, we cannot think of another industry that has had to essentially give something away. You don't go to the grocery store and get free groceries. My insurance payments are still due, you know.
Covered California, the state-owned insurance program didn't say you didn't have to pay for your health insurance. Yeah, you know, you and I have had this conversation. Insurance companies didn't give forgiveness. You're lucky if your telephone or internet provider or cell phone provider give you a month or two.
Right.
We're the only industry that I know of that has been basically said you're going to have to operate, do your business without getting any money.
And the thought process there is, you know, folks are being asked to shelter in place, stay in their homes, and they need to have those homes in place to be able to do that. And we completely sympathize with that.
Absolutely.
But the flip side of that is if you force a property owner into losing that property, for being foreclosed upon, having to sell that property, you're going to end up with the same impact, and we're going to lose units out there on the rental market. And we see the articles every day. There are no shortage of folks coming in and buying homes.
Investors paying cash. I've seen commercials for realtors saying we specialize in cash purchases, and that means their investors are coming in, and it's not VRBO and those sorts of things. And so we end up exiting this pandemic with less rental units, not more.
Yeah, I mean, we always say, you know, it's the path of least resistance. And if it just becomes too difficult to operate a rental, financially burdensome, you're going to go a different direction, and that potentially results in losing a rental unit or multiple units, depending on the path they go. So something we're working on, keep on your radar. If you're not signed up for our action alerts, please go to our website, SoCalRHA.org, and click on advocacy. You can sign up to get our action alerts, and we use those to alert you to local, state, and federal issues where you can weigh in and write to your elected officials. We will keep you apprised of what's going on, both with the state legislation and local moratoria. We don't think it's going to stop with the city of San Diego. We're urging local leaders to ask state legislators to move quickly on a statewide solution, so we don't have to go down the path of advocating at every different local jurisdiction and then having to turn around and try to help you navigate those. But it's an uphill battle, and Alan mentioned the different makeup in the federal in Congress, and we are seeing very different kind of makeups in our local levels. The state remains a super majority of one party, no real surprises there. But on the local level, we now have local councils and a county board of supervisors that is weighted completely differently than it has been in the past. So we can expect very different types of policies coming forward, I think, at the county level. And certainly we'll see similar things in the city of San Diego and some other local jurisdictions, and they'll just be a little bit more difficult to stop. And that's why it's so important that we have you, the constituents, you, the property owners, the people who are being impacted, speaking up on the impacts to you and to your residents, and making sure that we continue to make the case that you are not greedy landlords, you're not these horrible people that are trying to kick people out, because we know that's not the case. And quite honestly, we just don't hear enough in the media about those great relationships that you have with your tenants and how you've worked with them and waived rent and created payment plans and whatever the case may be.
You are housing providers. That is in true fact what you are. You are housing providers. You house over half our population in San Diego, nearly half in the entire state of California. You're a key part of the foundation of the economy here. And remember that your voice absolutely does matter. Molly, before we go, I just want to touch on, can you just give 2 seconds on the fire retrofit things that are popping up?
Yes, so property owners in the city of San Diego have probably received a fire inspection, and depending on their property's age, they've probably received a notice that they need to retrofit and put in certain types of audible fire alarms. This is a requirement that snuck under the radar in state fire code. It was actually put in place a few years ago. We did not get any education or outreach like we did in the past, say for instance with the smoke detectors. And so it was a complete surprise to us. So far it seems like it's just the city of San Diego who's enforcing on this. They realize that people need time to budget and to make these changes, and so they're saying, as long as you kind of start the process or pull a permit or what have you, that they'll work with you for a while. But realistically, it's a very costly change, and we've seen different figures. 18-unit buildings with $30,000 or $40,000 quotes, and that doesn't even include monthly monitoring. And it's something, again, that property owners probably haven't budgeted for. And now it's happening at a time where you may not be getting rent, and maybe using your reserves or any, money set aside for those kinds of things to cover the rent you're not getting. Not only that, it's an invasive process. You have to go into every unit to put in these alarms. And we know all too well that there's different levels of comfort from residents on having third parties in their units. And certainly we don't think it's wise to have people go into units if you don't have to. We're suggesting that maintenance really only be for emergencies and things that need to be done in the immediate future. So we're working on that, not only at the city level, but also at the state level, trying to appeal to the fire marshal to give us some sort of reprieve, especially in light of COVID. It's a work in progress, but we do encourage you to get in touch with us or send us your quotes once you get them, so we can continue to make the case.
I'll say that city staff has been very cooperative, very understanding of the issue, very sympathetic. They have to do their job, but they have been understanding. We're very appreciative of that. They've been excellent to work with on that. It does seem like it's something that that needs to start at the state level, and we are working with our state fire marshal on that, and we have been for several months. So thank you for that. I just want to make sure people do that. We are actually out there doing stuff on that as well. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
Can I make one last plea?
Please, yes.
Yeah, I've talked to some owners and managers in the last couple of weeks, and don't forget about AB 1482. I brought that up and they say, what's that? And again, that is that landmark legislation that was passed a couple years ago now that essentially puts in place statewide rent control, rent caps, and statewide just cause. And it's very important that you know about that and you adhere to it. There are certain exemptions in place, but you have to provide certain notices to your residents to have or to maintain that exemption. There's other requirements. All the mandatory language is in our forms and our rental agreements and in addendums. So please, visit our website, use our most updated forms whenever possible, especially when you're doing new leases, and go to our website, socalrha.org, and scroll down a little bit. You'll see AB 1482 resources. You click on that. There's a whole overview of the law. And more importantly, we list the figures there that are your allowable rent increases. So it's 5% plus the change in the consumer price index from a certain date to another date. We list the current figure. We even provide a link to the state's website where you can look it up yourself. I just, you can get in a lot of trouble for violating these laws, and we would hate to see anybody do so just because they didn't know that that existed. In the same vein, you can go to our homepage and scroll down and click on AB 3088 resources. Again, that's probably only in place for another few weeks, but in the meantime, you can't do 3-day notices right now. You have to do 15 days. You have to include certain forms. So please make sure you're taking advantage of those resources that we provide.
Yeah. Thanks, Molly. I appreciate it. It's a lot of information in a short time period, but we figured it's the beginning of the year. We'll just get this kicked off and give you guys a quick update. Watch for more in the future, and thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good day.